So the thing about personal biases is that they tend to change as we are introduced to new things or obtain new information. And my Smash biased rosters are no exception to that. So I kind of went through everything and thought there was enough that I would change to where it was worth putting out an update. As you can see right here, 64 didn't change. And either did Melee. We started off slow, but it picks up more and more through each game, which I guess is just a product of being able to dig deeper for characters. Brawl has just one change, as you can see right here. The Black Knight has replaced Micaiah. Fire Emblem's reps in Smash is something I'm always going back and forth on, but my initial thinking was that Micaiah would have stood out quite a bit, being a magic wielder. And that's still the case, but we did also introduce Zelda in Brawl, who would be kind of similar. And then I just kind of thought more and more about the Black Knight. I feel like Fire Emblem could use a dedicated villain rep, and I don't know what it is about the Black Knight. Maybe it's his badass design or the general lore or expectations of a Black Knight character in fantasy series. But he always stood out amongst the villains of the series, and I would argue that even today, you can probably ask a bunch of people who aren't super familiar with the series to name a villain, and this would probably be the guy that comes up the most. He would kind of be like Ike, but I feel like he would at least aesthetically fit the heavy swordsman moveset a little better, obviously being in big clunky armor. And where it is a shame to, not have a magic caster for the series for now, I still feel like he would round out our current roster for Fire Emblem very well, both now and in the future. Smash 4 base game only has 2 changes. Once again, on the Fire Emblem side, we have Robin instead of Tiki. Honestly, the main reason I threw in Tiki instead of Robin was because you already had the mage moveset represented through Micaiah, but now that Micaiah is not in the game, it just doesn't make as much sense for me to add Tiki instead, especially with some of the complications that can come with her potential moveset. The other change I made was I essentially put a new character in the Olimar Alf situation. I took a chance on Rachel in Brawl, and where I think it makes sense for the time, I feel like it looks weird as we go along, so I've decided that she will now be an alt for her sister Nell in Smash 4 Forward. Simultaneously, I think it would be cool too if we were able to do the same thing when we introduced Andy as an Echo Fighter, to have Sammy as an alt, if possible. It's almost the opposite situation of Olimar and Alf, where we initially went with Alf, but then the series sort of moved on, and Olimar was still sort of the more recognizable character, so we sort of correct that next time around, I guess, is the best way to put it. I don't know. I guess this works. I guess just something else to note, too, is that for Brawl and Smash 4, we introduced Meta Knight and DDD, and overall, I think they're very interchangeable. I'm very mixed on them. I like Meta Knight better overall, but I feel like DDD fits in the Smash roster better overall, so who gets introduced when is certainly subject to change back and forth, based on how I'm feeling around that time, I guess. Smash 4 DLC is where things really begin to pick up for my changes. So, for our Echo Fighter, I just swapped Dark Samus and Andy, since we already gave Advance Wars a little something new with the whole Nell situation. I thought I would bump up Dark Samus, because, like I said, in general, I was kind of itching for a more dedicated Prime rep. The other change I made with our Echo Fighters is I had Giga Mac replace King Hippo as a Donkey Kong Echo. So overall, admittedly, I'm not too big of a fan of Punch-Out, but with its connections to the Mario series, I kind of like the idea, similar to what we did with Foreman Spike and even Mach Rider, adding him in as an Echo Fighter, and actually Balloon Fighter as well this time around. And I originally went with King Hippo and Donkey Kong because, well, Donkey Kong appears in Punch-Out Wii, and his moveset is primarily consisting of punches, so it fits. The only issue was I feel like King Hippo's stance and form, particularly around his stomach, are quite a bit different. But I felt like you can make it work if you really wanted to. But then I sort of thought about Giga Mac, who I felt their physical body fit closer to Donkey Kong. Not only that, but now you're repping at least a form of the main character of the series. I don't know, this sort of went over my head, but I eventually just sort of came up with the idea and I liked it better. So there's several DLC characters I sort of swapped around the timing of, so this is essentially the spot that was occupied by Ruby Heart. Personally, I didn't want to represent Street Fighter itself. I wanted to represent the broader Capcom fighting game series. And I felt like the best way to do that was by repping one of the handful of characters that was in the big crossover that featured several of the fighting game characters, being Marvel vs. Capcom, and Ruby Heart being sort of the most recognizable character from that end of things. But then I thought about 12, where 12 doesn't appear in any of the crossover games. They, alongside their predecessor 11, have shown the ability to be able to shapeshift and mimic the moves of other fighters, which is something we even see from other big fighting game characters. But then I thought to sort of the ditto concept I had of representing a bunch of different fighters in one. And I really like the idea, and I think it fit. I can picture 12, maybe they wouldn't be able to shapeshift on 3DS, but in other versions, taking the physical form of Ryu, sort of, grayed out like their base color or whatever alt color you're using, and, using a Hadouken or shapeshifting to Morgan from Darkstalkers and using her wings as a recovery or something. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do and a lot of cool series that I would really like to represent with this fighter. And this would overall fit what I was going for in general better than Ruby Heart. And we end Smash 4 DLC now with Dante. This is a character I'm admittedly taking a bit of a chance on. I've only played Devil May Cry 2, and it was very meh. However, I feel like the aesthetic and gameplay of Devil May Cry has influenced so many games, several of which I enjoy quite a bit. And I don't know, I just have a lot of confidence in this series that I'm going to eventually get around to playing one of the better games, and it's going to turn into a favorite. I also sort of like the backstory of the series. I think it started off as a Resident Evil game, which I can already imagine that, being part of a Smash presentation, that little trivia fact. And hell, I know some of the people involved in Devil May Cry have already sort of addressed the idea of him being in Smash, so I think it would definitely fit well around the Smash ballad as well. And I know one of the big things was, one of his games hasn't appeared on Nintendo consoles at this point, yet the character has. As you can see, the art was taken from Project X Zone, or Cross Zone, whatever it's supposed to be called, which I believe would be out by this point. Hell, the sequel might be out as well. And I feel like Cloud and Joker were in very similar situations when they were added. This spot overall would replace Monika. Now, I had this spot a lot later, mainly because Doki Doki Literature Club Plus didn't come out till so much later. But overall, I think I even made a note when I did my initial biased video of some of the reasons I want Monika and Smash don't really fit as well overall with my biased rosters. I mean, we have Ayumi as a visual novel rep. Several different series use horror elements. I guess we're still kind of missing an indie rep. But I don't think that itself is enough to carry Monika onto the roster. Unfortunately, I would still like to at least, have a spirit event or some sort of representation for the series. But overall, I decided that this outcome was better. Like I said, overall, I'm not as familiar with the series as most people. This is the stage I see brought up the most. Temin Nigru. I don't know what the subtitle would be. Maybe Tower Gateway or Hell's Gates. But overall, for the Doki Doki stage, I wound up using the Magic Hand layout. And I think that can kind of fit here too. You would be at the top of the tower. And then you'll just have some solid floating platforms where the other non-central platforms of Magic Hand are. And unfortunately, you can't use the mechanic I would have used for a Doki Doki stage with the words and the different character having an effect on the stage, but maybe you can go back to the way Magic Camp was originally and have some sort of demon character, enemy, whatever, appear that one player could recruit, similar to the Flying Man. And this is our new final Ultimate roster with all changes. Obviously, I'm going to dive into the ones we had in Ultimate, though, of course. So we'll kick things off with our Echo Fighters. Something I never specified when I initially did my biased rosters is I brought back Slippy and Rob64, who are essentially the Ice Climbers. They at least have the same gimmick, but they were on 3DS and the 3DS can't handle them. Well, I probably would have gone a different way about it. I probably would have, in Smash 4, rather than have a full set of custom moves, you would have 2 different move sets that can be one exclusive to the Wii U and one that's in both. And the one that would be in both would just have Rob64's head kind of follow Slippy around, almost like Aku Aku with Crash. And maybe you can do some different things with knockback, with maybe Rob64 always being knocked back a little further, or maybe with a damage limit similar to Luma. And overall, I feel like that change would make it similar to Rosalina and Luma, which the 3DS could handle. So overall, I think we should keep that idea, this alternative iteration of the moveset, but move it to the next Star Fox character online, who I decided was Krystal. Maybe she wouldn't have Rob64's head when, Slippy goes back to the original moveset. Maybe I used the bomb from that concept art for Star Fox Assault. Maybe it would just be something brand new, or there's some sort of drone or something you can use from the Star Fox series. And she would overall replace Veronica, because Veronica was an echo of Micaiah, who isn't on the roster anymore. And one of the reasons it kind of worked was because they were both dedicated magic wielders, but now we have Robin, who also uses a sword, so it doesn't work as well, even if we did still want Veronica. As I sort of mentioned earlier, another idea I've been back and forth on is who should be our Pikmin Echo fighter. I originally had the President. I've also mentioned Louie, and now I'm leaning towards Alf. Overall, similarly to Krystal, and I sort of had this idea thanks to a Project M mod, but I kind of like the idea of maybe having, Olimar with sort of the normal Pikmin moveset, and maybe Alf would only use a rock Pikmin. So you only have one Pikmin to work with, but it's a lot more powerful. And maybe that would be the iteration you would see on the 3DS, which would carry over to the Alf Echo in Ultimate. Because I can picture that being a little easier on the 3DS, and then maybe you can go a little more all out with the exclusive Wii U moveset, maybe giving Olimar 6 Pikmin like he had back in Brawl. I don't know, overall I don't like sort of changing concepts, I guess, to overall fit the 3DS's limitations. I would rather find some sort of other workaround and have that, slight difference in customizable moves, if that makes any sense. And hopefully that wouldn't be too much. So I kind of switched two of our roles between two of our earlier third-party series that we're in. First being Ninja Gaiden Dead or Alive having a unique fighter, and Crash Bandicoot having an Echo, and I've swapped that. So now Dead or Alive / Ninja Gaiden will have a Echo fighter in base game. I went with Ayane. I did this for a couple reasons. One, to sort of still leave the idea I had for Kasumi on the table before, locking her to an Echo fighter. Plus, she can maybe work as an assist. Not only that, but I can sort of picture Ayane having a purple-esque effects with her moves. I think she does in the Dead or Alive games, maybe in Ninja Gaiden too. And that was another reason I went with her, was because I feel like she's more closely connected to Ninja Gaiden and crossovers. She appeared as a guest in Ninja Gaiden 2 and 3, where Kasumi only appeared in 3. And I believe she's just been overall used more for crossovers, so I feel like there's a little logic there as well. Like I said, there would be some creative liberties taken, but overall I don't think it would be that out there to see Ayane with a Hayabusa-inspired Smash moveset. And for Crash Bandicoot, now you'll be getting a fighter later down the line, but it'll be a unique one, Dingodile. I was originally thinking, it had to be Coco or Cortex, but then I kind of thought about it more, and I also saw some discussion about it on Smashboards. I think Dingodile could work and fit. Like, he is a fan favorite character. They did make a decent deal out of him being playable in It's About Time, which would be coming out, or I think it would have been out around this time, which in itself is a reason for him to be added. And I feel like you can have some fun with the moveset with the flamethrower, and I forget what the thing he has in It's About Time is called, but you can have some fun with that too. Just sort of the vacuum thing. I don't know, I just feel like he can be fun, and I feel like he would fly enough under the radar to be a surprise, but popular and unique enough to not feel sort of weird, if that makes sense. As for the stage, it is a shame that we won't be able to use Unforgettable, but I feel like we should have a Crash 4 stage, and I'm going with Quantum Rifts, subtitle Insane Dimensions. Basically similar to how Unforgettable was a museum stage that sort of was a spiritual successor to our other museum stage. I'll have this stage be a spiritual successor to the Warp Room stage, which in itself, I guess, was kind of similar in concept to Garrick Mach, which we used a different layout overall for when we added that stage, where you'll just be warping between 4 locations, except here, instead of going to a location, then back to the warp room, then to another location, you'd probably just go straight from one dimension to another through 4 of them and then repeat. As for the 4 that I would use, I would probably use the ones that had bosses: Hazardous Waste, Tranquility Falls. Aegipus was pretty memorable. The other one's kind of more up in the air. Maybe I would use Bermugula. Maybe throw in some CTR references, since we never threw in a stage from that. So you probably noticed that Yakuza / Like a Dragon was added much later, and has a different rep now. So don't get me wrong, Majima's is still my favorite character in the series. It's not that I like Majima any less than I did before. It's more that I like Kiryu more now that I've played a couple more games in the series. And sort of realize, I don't remember where I was at with the series when I initially did the biased roster, maybe I was or playing Kiwami 2 at the latest. But now I'm almost done with 3, and I sort of realized it just seems weird having Majima be playable instead of Kiryu, now that I've spent a lot more time playing as him. And either way, both could work with a moveset in Smash. I don't know, Majima may have been a little easier because I just felt like his moveset with the bat and his one with sort of the dancing moves would have stood out together in Smash, but with Kiryu, I mean, obviously he has some basic brawler moves, and I would maybe take inspiration from some of the heat actions for his other attacks. Maybe some gimmick around bigger heat actions for his character overall. But yeah, and like I said, the other change I made was that I introduced the series later, mainly because where Yakuza 0 is a very important game in the series, it seems like. It's the one that really helped it take off, and where it was out during Smash 4 DLC, I actually realized that it wasn't necessarily localized everywhere at that point. So when we get to Smash Ultimate DLC, we would be past that point by a bit. So I just felt like the timing worked better here. Another change I decided to make was replacing the farmer from Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons with the Sim from The Sims. I like both series, and I feel like they're kind of similar in a way. They're more sort of casual, relaxing games that would probably bring in a different but potentially similar audience. And I don't know, I always felt kind of weird with The Sims just because there isn't like a set character, you know? Like it's all customizable in that. So overall, I would call the character the Sim, and I decided to take the most popular male and female Sim, and they would be who is represented. I don't know if they're all to be them in different outfits, or you take other popular pre-made Sims. I think a moveset could definitely work out, though, with some of different series elements. I saw a Smashboards concept, I forget who it was by, I apologize, that sort of also brought in a gimmick around the Sims mood, which could be kind of fun. Maybe the Sim symbol that's always above the character could be there too and sort of do its own things, like maybe spawn different items in that. I don't know, overall, I felt like this would just be a bigger inclusion overall. I just feel like The Sims is overall a bigger series, and we're already working with EA because we added a Mass Effect rep, so overall, the stage, I think you can probably still use the Find Me Midgar hybrid. Just instead of forest spirits, maybe you're collecting a symbol, maybe based on, aspirations or moods, but I don't kind of want to double down if we're doing that with the move set. So who knows, but use one or the other and have that affect the stage based on things associated with that element. And you can have like a plot of land and then just a higher big platform with, a Sim's house or whatever in the background. I don't know, I'd probably use a generic Sim Home subtitle Sim City because I feel weird about. I feel like you could pick any of these from The Sims 4, like the pre-made homes and plots of land, but I don't know, I would just feel weird about focusing on one if there isn't an obvious choice. And I don't know, I guess I haven't played The Sims 4 enough to really say if there is sort of a clear popular choice. And the final first party change I did with our roster was replacing Lora with Melia. It's two main reasons for that. The first is honestly, I just sort of messed up the timing of stuff with the Xenoblade series. I thought Torna would have been sort of the latest thing out around that point, but it actually would have been Definitive Edition, which a big selling point was Future Connected, which has a big focus on Melia. Not only that, but I felt like Melia would have been a little more unique and standoutish. Lora and Shulk are both kind of sword wielders. I believe I haven't played the games other than two, so I'm not familiar with Melia too much, but I believe she's sort of a magic staff wielder, maybe a healer, similar to Palutena, who we never added, so she can sort of fit that niche. Overall, I did also consider at one point replacing Byleth with the Flame Emperor. Spoiler alert, aka Edelgard, mainly because I didn't want to pick one of the house leaders, and I felt that was kind of a decent compromise. One of those if you know, you know. But I also like the idea of adding a heavy armored unit, but since we added the Black Knight, I no longer needed to do that, and we kept Byleth. Besides that, you may have noticed, probably not, a lot of, timing changes with different characters. Like, I really liked the idea for 12, and I was a little more eager to introduce that concept over Yoshimitsu, so I sort of swapped their introductions, and like I said, I brought in Yakuza later. I decided to bring it in as soon as possible after that point, meaning I had to delay 2B to sort of be that conclusion of third-party content in that first fighter pass, bumping the sim up slightly, and then moving our Battletoads and Libros rep to the second fighter pass, whose concept I decided to overall change. I originally kind of had it like a new Ice Climbers-esque deal, but since we're not doing the Kasumi thing, I feel like you could have them sort of tag teaming in and out as a duo Pyramithra-esque deal, which is also part of the reason why I delayed them to sort of match up with that a little closer. I'm not sure, would that also, because I know they released a new Battletoads, would that actually be better timing overall too? I also just noticed Sony published this Battletoads game. That's kind of ironic, given Microsoft now owns Rare. But that's sort of the least of sort of the crazy things between those two. And I just decided to swap sort of that timing, the second fighter pass, with Arl and Tetrominos. Like I said, a couple of the things I don't really have a definitive reason why I did that, or why I just didn't leave the sim at the end and had Tubi take that spot and move the sim up. For some reason, I just thought it flowed better that way, personally. But that's all there is to really say about it. Moving forward, I mean, down the line, if I think of enough changes, I'll make another one of these updates. Hopefully not for a while. Also, I still plan to make a video on assist, and since I didn't get that far through the initial run, I will sort of address both ends, if you will. AKA, I would have addressed what my choices would have been for assist in both scenarios, both my 2023 bias and my 2024 bias. And then once again, if I make more changes, similar to what I did here with the stages, I'll address what's replacing what as well. But for that one, we're going to be looking at both scenarios. So that's that.